The world now knows the colors of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad's parachute, the Russian tricolor. Reportedly, allegedly, and all other English synonyms to a word maybe, Bashar al-Assad is safe and sound in Russia. We can't confirm otherwise other than trusting Russian media, and that is a bad source of bad water even on a bad day, so let us avoid using that. Instead, let us call Bashar al-Assad Bashar al-Schrödinger, a political corpse that might be or might be not physically dead. However, this way or the other, without a doubt, Assad's flight to Moscow following the swift collapse of his regime, and as was previously falsely reported also for his private jet, means more than just the loss of a client state for the Kremlin. The fall of the House of Assad deals a major blow to Russian dictator Vladimir Putin's aspirations as a Middle East power broker and raises new questions about how fragile his own regime is.
Putin has thrown Assad under the bus to prolong his war in Ukraine. His resources are scarce and he is not as strong as he pretends. Former Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba.
Assad's swift departure raises some striking historical parallels. Assad now joins a one-time Ukrainian counterpart in exile. Former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych fled Ukraine for Russia in 2014 after weeks of street protests that culminated in a bloody crackdown. We in Ukraine call it Maidan. Syrians are now roaming through Assad's abandoned presidential palace in Damascus, much as Ukrainians once were able to visit the grounds of Mazahiri, and they're able to do it now, the incredibly garish estate once occupied by Yanukovych. Mazahiri was later refashioned as a museum of corruption. Yanukovych has not returned to Ukraine since his ouster, even though Russia occupied more than 20% of Ukrainian territory. As Yanukovych knows exactly what awaits for him here in Ukraine, a prison. Unlike Yanukovych, who ran away from his people to Russia, or Assad, whose forces simply surrendered Damascus without any fight at all, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky held fast as Russian troops approached Kiev. And yes, say all you want, back then it was a matter of personal valor, just as well as national one. Remember Afghan President Ashraf Ghani, who was also, just as Zelensky, backed by the United States? He did waver and Afghanistan fell to the Taliban in 2021. Assad's flight from Syria was more than a moment for Ukrainians to revel in a symbolic setback for Putin. The Syrian regime crumbled exactly at the moment when Zelensky was in France to meet with President Emmanuel Macron and US President-elect Donald Trump ahead of the reopening ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral, where the Ukrainian leader received a standing ovation. The implosion of Assad's regime could potentially weaken Putin's hand in negotiations over ending the war in Ukraine, particularly if Putin's bellicose threats in recent weeks of nuclear escalation are perceived as what they actually are: hollow. Nearly 3 years into the war, these threats of Russian dictator have assumed a familiar rhythm. Each time Ukraine makes a request, asking for tanks, then fighter jet, then cluster munitions, then long-range weapons, our allies agonized over whether to grant it, fearing it would escalate the conflict and provoke a Russian response. And each time, when the West finally accepted Ukraine's requests, Russia's most catastrophic threats just did not materialize. What once was a Russian roulette, Putin turned into Russian taboo. What is taboo for the Kremlin 1 week becomes normal the next.